is heartbreaking to us.
This morning, Goodhue, Minnesota is scrambling. The entire police force is resigning, leaving the city's roughly 1,500 residents in law enforcement limbo. But Goodhue's mayor is sending an optimistic message about the future of the force.
We are going to rise above this, and I'm confident that we will have a full police department again.
All right, so we got to talk about this story about the entire police force in this small town who resigned. And it's funny because I like how Fox News puts it, defund the police lunatics got their wish. Now, obviously, we know after the George Floyd incident, there was a big backlash against law enforcement and policing in general. There were a lot of people who were saying, hey, we should just stop policing and defund the police and just go back to just kind of like this Wild West part of thing where there's no police and we're just all walking around and singing Kumbaya. These people just weren't living in reality. So we go to Goodhue in Minnesota, where the officers were essentially defunded, right? They weren't making any money. The pay was so low that it was like $22 an hour to be a police officer. And the police officers was like, hey, we got enough of it. And I think the timing of the story is very interesting because this came right after the Minnesota police officer Chauvin Tau, who was actually sentenced in the George Floyd incident. He was given 5 years for essentially just doing crowd control. This was the officer who didn't actually touch Floyd, didn't do anything. He was just essentially doing crowd control, and he was sentenced to 5 years. Here's that clip.
Minneapolis police officer Chauvin Tau will spend nearly 5 years in prison for his part in George Floyd's murder. He's the last of the 4 former officers involved to be sentenced. Our Barrett Leone was inside the courtroom this morning and has the latest.
Chauvin Tau took to the stand this morning, but what he had to say didn't exactly please Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill. Tau was sentenced to 57 months in prison, which is on the higher end of sentencing options.
Now, the interesting part about the Chauvin Tau incident is that Tau didn't touch Floyd. He literally was just there doing crowd control while the other 3 officers were on Floyd. And now I can't show you any of the pictures of that because this video get demonetized, like the other video I did on Chauvin Tau got demonetized. But that's essentially what happened. So he's doing 5 years because he was doing crowd control, and the judge said he should have allowed the crowd to attack the other officers. He should have attacked the other officers. So because he was doing crowd control and never touched Floyd, he gets 5 years in prison because he was a senior officer and he should have known better. I think 5 years for this officer was just way extreme. And I think that leads other officers to think, well, wow, if this guy's getting 5 years for doing crowd control, right? He didn't touch Floyd. That's unreasonable. So why am I doing this job for $22 an hour? What's in it for me, right? That's if you go to McDonald's, you're getting $15 an hour, right? The fight for 15 now. And some places you're getting 20. Why am I being an officer getting $22 an hour? And then if I do crowd control and somebody behind me does something stupid, I can go to jail for 5 years? No, it's ridiculous. And what about the other 2 officers? The guy who was on the job for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Don't get me wrong. No matter how much you feel about Chauvin was wrong. And yes, Chauvin, he should have known that Floyd was in trouble. 8 minutes is way too long, to hold somebody down and all this other stuff. That's just crazy. But the other 2 officers who were there 2 weeks on the job, you're going to give him for 4 years. The guy who's doing crowd control, you give him 5 years. That's just unreasonable, and I think the officers have to put that into account. Like, hey, I'm putting my freedom on the line every day and I can be out there doing crowd control and get 5 years because somebody behind me did something stupid and somebody died, from whatever. So here's why these officers are leaving or resigning.
The main reason for the officers leaving? Disputes over their pay. The Goodhue police chief, who resigned late last week, had previously requested higher pay for his officers and better recruitment efforts. The department was comprised of many part-time officers who were loyal to their chief.
We were really there for him more so than, needing a part-time job. And so with him going, there just really wasn't any need for any of us to stick around.
Police departments nationwide are facing a vicious cycle of retirements, resignations, and fewer hires.
Yeah, think about it, though. If you were on the job as a police officer, right now you put hands on somebody, they're looking to put you in the jail. The criminal, they're essentially, you arrest somebody, they're letting them right back out because of bail reform. Everything that you do as an officer, or you were doing as an officer to keep order, to keep crime low, you're now being looked at as the villain. So yeah, officers and people who are in those jobs are like, it's just not worth it. And then if you're not going to pay us, you're paying these people, like these guys are getting $22. You're not going to pay us? Well, okay. See you later. And like they're saying, they're like, hey, we're helping out the chief. But as soon as the chief said he's gone because of low pay, they're out too. Why are they going to put their lives on the line and their freedom on the line for a system that doesn't appreciate them and that overcharges them? I think Tau was overcharged. Don't get me wrong. Maybe he's not a cop anymore. Maybe say, okay, you're going to lose your job. But 5 years in prison for crowd control? That's a huge message to people out there who want to do the job and who are taking the hit and pay just to say, hey, we want to help people out. But at this point in time, the risk versus the benefit is just too crazy. It's just insane.
A survey released in April indicated that while police departments are recruiting more officers compared to 2020, departments saw 47% more resignations and 19% more retirements in 2022 compared to 2019. The staffing crunch is leaving some communities underprotected. Back in Goodhue, residents are on edge.
It's just unnerving to know that they may not be there, even though, yes, they're talking about having Goodhue County come in. I just prefer Goodhue having their own police department.
Now, it's weird because the people who are most affected by police resignations and police, not being there are the people, let's say, in the tough neighborhoods, the inner cities, those people. Like the people, I think the George Floyd effect against law enforcement is a double-edged sword. On one end, it did identify some inequities in policing, right? So you identify that and you say, okay. But I believe there was an overreaction to it, where now every police officer suspect, every person who a police officer arrests is a victim of police brutality, and that just was not the case. And when the state now comes and says, we're going to put people in jail for 5 years for crowd control, that message resonates with those officers who are getting low pay. When you're just starting out as an officer, you're getting crap pay, you're getting crap hours, you're doing all this, and essentially you're trying to do it to have a career in this thing, but also you want to help the greater good. And I think at the end of the day, if none of those things are lining up, what benefit is it to you to go out and do these jobs? Like what benefit is? What's the benefit? And if you're in the black community, that's why places like DC are calling for the National Guard, and places like Oakland are calling for the National Guard, because officers don't want to put themselves in a position to go out there and do their job, because if they do, they're looked at as the criminal. And I think that needs to stop. That needs to stop so we can get to some semblance of rationality here. But, I'm a lunatic, so that's what they're going to say. I'm a lunatic.
The city's mayor says the former police chief, Josh Smith, and another full-time officer will stay on the force until the 24th. After that, the Goodhue County Sheriff's Office will be taking over.
Now, what that means, the Goodhue County is, so you have state, county, and city. So if the city doesn't have their police force, the county comes in and the county police force takes it over. It takes over the duties of responding to incidents and stuff like that. But it seems like this city maybe just couldn't afford their police department, and maybe that, what do? You raise taxes? That's not going to go over well. Like, hey, okay, you guys want police, we got to raise your taxes, right? Property taxes, things of that nature, so we can have the police force. I don't think the good people of Goodhue maybe want to do that, because what they were paying these officers, like $22 an hour, was not cutting it. And the police chief was like, yo, we need to be able to pay people more money, right, to take this job. $22 an hour, they can go flip burgers for $22 an hour and don't have to worry about doing crowd control and doing 5 years in prison, right? It's a less stressful job. They don't have to worry about the training. It's one thing that, and I know all you officers probably know this, anybody who's in law enforcement, but they usually tell you, you're close, when you join law enforcement, you're closer to prison than at any time in your life. So because your mistakes are judged by prosecutors, and if you can it'll be easier for you to go to jail through your mistakes than someone else, right? Your mistakes are criminal, unfortunately. And that's a scary thought if you're a new officer and you're like, well, if I can get $22 an hour to do something else, where if my mistakes aren't criminal, then I'm gonna do that. Now let me know where I'm in the comment section. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you next time. Peace.